This is the Hot Take Hockey Podcast with your hosts, Lucas and John Viveiros.
Hey everyone, it's John here from Hot Take Hockey, joined by the legend Lucas, and it's episode 10 of the Hot Take Hockey Podcast. We made it, number 10. Lucas, man, season's underway, so it's kind of been perfect timing. We've gotten, now the 10th episode right as the season gets going. How are you feeling? Are we already feeling pretty rough on some of our takes? And just what are you thinking going into the season?
I'm feeling really great, John. Hockey's back. Let's go. Seen some good games in the first week here of the season. Happy to have our podcast now on Spotify, Apple, all your podcast streaming platforms. But as far as, like we were talking off air, there's some takes we've had early on in the season that aren't looking too good. But I mean, I don't want to panic yet. It's 1 week. But yeah, there's lots of players that we've highlighted in the past that are certainly doing what we projected them to do. And then there's some that a little bit colder, like we were talking about off air, like a Jack Hughes, a bit of a slow start for the Devils.
Yeah, a lot of teams right now that are, again, it's the overreaction time of the year right away in the October time. But yeah, I'm glad you shouted that out. Anyone watching on YouTube, we are now on Spotify, Apple, so go check it out, the Hot Take Hockey Podcast. So big shouts to Lucas for heading that process. So yeah, let's get into it. I think that's kind of our conversation. Let's kind of go through the overreactions. Let's go through each division just quickly, and then we kind of talk about just maybe our own personal storylines. But let's start with the Metro, because the Metro one's the really interesting one. And we were just on one of our last episodes talking with Isles Girl. We were laughing at the Philadelphia Flyers. And early on here, I mean, again, it's very early, so things will just switch up so quickly. But how can we see in the Metro division the Philadelphia Flyers having this start, and everyone was like guaranteeing them at the bottom, and now the Tortorella effect? And I think both of us were kind of saying, like, don't be surprised if they are mediocre at least. I still think they're not going to make the playoffs, but what are you thinking on that Metro? And just, I mean, it seems like the Blue Jackets are super stinky right now, and the Devils.
Yeah, I don't want to give us too much of a pat on the back, but I mean, John, we did call a little bit the Tortorella effect. You know, he's loving Scott Lawton, like we said, and
top line action.
Yeah, and those Flyers, they've come out buzzing. And my boy Carter Hart, he's looked pretty good so far. But yeah, I think the Flyers, you know, they're gonna see a cool off period eventually here. But it's great to see them start strong. I mean, as far as the Blue Jackets go, I didn't have them in the playoffs, but with Patty Laine going down, it's going to be real tough for them to stay relevant as the season starts. So that's one to keep an eye on. For sure, to see if they even can hang on and play some 500 hockey to stay level before Patty Laine gets back. But some other highlights, I mean, just quickly within the Metro, the Rangers look really good. Yeah. The Rangers look like that team that everybody was, you know, riding home to those conference finals, and a lot of people were picking them to go deep again this year, and they're looking solid. But yeah, I mean, just what are some other quick hits you want to get on with the Metro here? I mean, Ovi just had a couple goals the other night.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's the thing, right? Like, and we were talking about it off there. Like, it's just such a piss off to be that guy that just didn't pick Crosby or didn't pick Ovi in fantasy if he was there for you. And then, like, if they're both healthy, we've always talked about it. Like, they're going to put up numbers. Ovi's going to put up goals. Crosby's going to put up points. And it's just like, I'm pissed off too, not picking Sid, because I'm like watching Crosby and Gensel when they're both healthy. It's electric, those two. I mean, we talk about duos in the league, and I feel like it's just kind of lazy sometimes, because you want to go through the newer, fresher duos, like talking about the Draisaitl McDavid, talking about Matthews Marner, talking about all these newer duos. But it's like Gensel right in there with Sid is just so electric. I mean, Crosby makes whoever better, but honestly, it's looking like Gensel makes Crosby better when he's top of his game as well.
Absolutely. And like Gensel too, I feel like Crosby's had so many different wingers through his career, and like Gensel's just stuck there for so long. Yeah. They got such a nice chemistry going. And even Malkin scored a couple goals the other night. So
yeah, so look out for the Pens. I think we were pretty like good with that Metro structure. The only team, like I said, that's maybe surprising us early on is the Flyers. But outside of that, like Washington, we'll see what happens. Obviously, the injuries are a conversation, but I think both of us were pretty solid on Pittsburgh, Rangers, Hurricanes. I had Hurricanes as, like I said, they were going to be the 3 or 4 spot, because for me, my confidence has been Pittsburgh, Rangers 1-2 going into the season. So outside of that, I think the Islanders, they smacked the Ducks real good, but I think the Islanders might still find it tough against these other Metro teams. So let's go over to the other East division here and talk about the Atlantic, because I think early on here, the Boston Bruins, I want to talk about them as a team, because no McAvoy, no Marchand. We talked about the concern, but they're looking decent. Like they're looking like they're going to be in every game going into the season. And I mean, goaltending will be a question mark. As we were recording this video, Ottawa's kind of putting a smack on them right now. But what do you think about the Boston Bruins? Do you think the Florida teams will still be in there? And I mean, we'll have the conversation about our Leafs being kind of a write-off, a mess at the start of the year. Like, what are we thinking?
Yeah. First off, with the Bruins, I mean, like, I always find their goaltending to be like tough to gauge who's going to start most of the games. And I find it interesting that they've played Allmark, out of the gate quite a bit here. But David Krejci's really, really surprised me. I mean, for a guy who left the league to come back and just fit in like he never left, it's crazy to see his production so far. I personally wasn't high on him just getting back to form, but he's really blown my expectations out of the water. And big reason why the Bruins have a 3-0 start, going into tonight, as you were saying, they were losing at this point, but so far, great start for them. I mean, the Florida teams, I'm not too worried about Tampa right now. I know it's only 3 games in and they're 1-2 as we speak. They've had a bit of a tougher start, but they had the Rangers to start the year, which was always going to be a tough game. And I'm never worried about the Lightning. I feel like they're always going to find their form when they really want to, and they'll be in the playoffs. But Ottawa has surprised me, I think, a little bit. I wasn't as high on Ottawa as others, but I didn't think they were going to start, like this, especially with that opening loss to the Sabres. I just thought that was a slam dunk win for them against their old goaltender, Craig Anderson, but apparently not. And then
Craig Anderson's done that a lot in his career, though.
He's like a spoiler.
Those crazy one-off performances.
Yeah, he's done that to the Leafs a few times too. Yeah. So you can't really doubt him even in his age. But Montreal, I want to talk about Montreal a little bit too, because I feel like Marty St. Louis
overtime win against Pittsburgh too.
Yeah, overtime win against Pittsburgh, that big opening night win against the Leafs. I think St. Louis, he's going to keep them competitive. Again, I think they're going to fade out as the season goes, but he really keeps them coached really well. And Caulfield looks like the sniper that he's blossoming into, that people think he's going to turn into. I mean, he looks like he's going to be a 40-goal guy when he gets going. I don't know if it's this year for sure yet. It very well might be. But obviously the supporting cast isn't as great in Montreal right now. And I'll throw it back over to you how about you touch on the Leafs before I get into our Maple Leafs?
Well, I do want to have the conversation because I think Ottawa has always been the team that's been hyped up, but I want to have that conversation just based on what we've seen. I think the easy answer might be Detroit here, but I feel like between Detroit, Buffalo, Montreal, who's that team that can maybe surprise us with how crowded the Atlantic is? But let's finish off the Atlantic with the Leafs conversation. So do you feel like it's Detroit still? Because I think that's where we were kind of swaying. But you just kind of alluded to Montreal doing stuff. And then Buffalo looks like they've been in every game. They're even in that Florida game. It was like a one hiccup that screwed them. But
I still think it's Detroit is the cream out of those 3. Maybe I doubted Ville Husso a little bit. He's looking good so far. And I think Detroit just overall, they've added so many good pieces there. And Yzerman's done a good job building that team up. So I think Detroit is probably the cream out of those 3. Yeah. What about you?
And that Detroit third line, like I think the average height there is like 6'6", 6'7". Like it's a crazy line. Like Soderblom's like 6'8".
Yeah.
So that Red Wings, honestly, Perron put up 3 points the other night. Like I think that Red Wings offense is deep enough. They're deep enough that they even had Zadina scratched on one of the nights. So I think the Red Wings, if they can have consistent goaltending, the defense is obviously still a question mark, but let's talk about consistent goaltending and questionable defense lately. The Toronto Maple Leafs, man, Muzzin goes down. We've already had the complaints of Justin Hall playing major minutes, and now more so going to have to play some major minutes. And I don't know, Lucas, if I have to watch Justin Hall play another final minute of the game, and what's actually funny, he was actually a decent part of the Leafs holding that lead against the Caps in the final minute. And it's like, what version of Justin Hall? You either get like the simple Justin Hall where it's like, you know what, if he makes the simple plays a structured game, especially on the penalty kill, it's like whatever. But then he starts doing too much. Honestly, I have heart pain when I watch this guy start circling the offensive zone. And it's like, he scored the goal against Ottawa. Great. We can laugh about it. But it's just like, he does so – it's one of those things like – and this was always the Jake Gardner conversation. Like, he does great things in moments. But it's like when the bad like overtakes the good, then you really start you need to start having the conversation of like, is it worth it? Like, and Justin Hall, for me, it is not worth it. He does simple plays. He does defensive situational things on the penalty kill, but it is not worth it to watch. Easily 2 points have been thrown away because of the Jake Muzzin and Justin Hall pair. and specifically Justin Hall against the Arizona Coyotes. The whole team was garbage, absolutely garbage. And I'm going on a bit of a rant right now, but that giveaway from Justin Hall, I know you were like, right when that giveaway happened, it was like back of the net.
Yeah, I was fuming when I saw that. I mean, when it comes to Justin Hall, it's like, if I don't notice him throughout the game, it's probably a good thing.
It's a great thing.
It's a great thing.
Absolutely great.
He's chipping the puck off the glass. That's all I want him to do. Please get rid of the puck when you have it. I don't want you to skate it out. I don't want you to try to be a hero.
Oh, he's exactly that type of defenseman. You do not want to notice that guy.
No. And so I mean, I was at the game on Saturday, as you know, and when Justin Hall tucked that goal in, I mean, I couldn't believe it. I'll just be candid and let our audience know that when Justin Hall got that puck, I looked over at my girlfriend and said, "Oh no, not Justin Hall, not Justin Hall." And he scored and proved me wrong. And that's fine.
Yeah, I want to give the guy credit, but that was like a beer league rebound right there. His buddy just stuffed it.
Yeah. But like to sum it all up, I think that pair of Muzzin and Hall needs to stop. I know Muzzin's out right now, and we'll see where that takes us. But I think that I've always been the guy that said when Seattle came into the league, I didn't think they should have protected Justin Hall. I was more than happy to do the majority forwards and keep a few more forwards than have Justin Hall. But anyways, this is where we're at right now. And I got
crapped on for saying that, Lucas, on YouTube, but I said my least protected list. Yeah. I had them protecting all of McCann, yeah, Engvall, keeping all of those guys and exposing Hall. But because he's a big right shot defenseman, like it's
and there's some validity to it where when you watch the Leafs, like sometimes I see Sandin and he looks like he's struggling a little bit on the right side, trying to keep pucks in and break out. I get that, but when there's a guy like Justin Hall, who realistically on a Stanley Cup winning team probably isn't even in your top six. Yeah, I think
a sixth defenseman,
maybe a six, but probably better suited as a seven even. I just think the Leafs are going to have to address that. And if they don't, and the goaltending struggles, which Samsonov's looked great so far, but if the goaltending does have hiccups, which it should with these inconsistent goaltenders, the Leafs are going to be in a little tougher than people thought, because I think a lot of hockey minds thought the Leafs were going to walk to second or first in this division. I just don't see it that easy yet.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're Kyle Dubas and with LTIR situational things, it's like if Muzzin finds himself gone for a bit, if Matt Murray, if it's longer than expected, like you got to use that flexibility, go after a Chikrin, go after somebody. Because we've talked about it, man, like the Dubas contract situation in the Leafs, and like basketball and hockey are different, but you're not going anywhere unless you start making like big shifts, especially when you have guys dropping like flies. Like Muzzin gone, obviously he wasn't looking good regardless, but Muzzin gone to the picture you have, and Giordano's looked good. He's looked slow at times, but he's looked good. It's like Riley, Brody, Giordano, and then after that, like you're just going off a cliff. Like you're relying on Hall to play major minutes, and then Sandin Liljegren. Like I love both those guys, but those guys aren't stepping on the penalty kill. Those guys can't be playing 20 plus minutes a night consistently. It just can't happen.
Those guys are going to take time to adjust. Like Sandin, I've been pretty hard on him early on here, but he came into training camp late with the contract dispute, and that's going to take time. When Liljegren gets back from his injury, it's going to take time. I mean, this defense is not going to look real complete until, I don't know, man, like Christmas time. So definitely someone to keep an eye on with the Leafs for sure.
Yeah. So naturally we went a little longer with our Leafs conversation, but guys, honestly, drop some comments. I think that's the big thing. I put a notice at the start of the pod, put a notice at the end, but just at the end of the day, always drop questions for us if you have anything. But if you want us to talk about a certain team more, if you want more of our rage or reaction on the Toronto Maple Leafs, definitely drop it below. So let's shift over to the Central here. And I got the Blues hat repping right now, and they get the first win. Do you think early on here, are you a little nervous? Because I know you got the Blues soft side. Are you a little nervous watching Colorado, obviously, what they can do? Dallas looks really good. I mean, we talked about it with Grav and Ottinger. Maybe people hyping him up too much, but I think the hype's deserved based on what we've seen so far. Mm-hmm. And Winnipeg, decent start beating the Rangers. And then you have obviously Nashville. They got smacked, I think, last game, but they started off the season with a few wins. So are you nervous for your Blues, or do you think after that first win, they still look like they're going in for a good season?
I think in general, like, I don't want to overstate this, but like, you know, it is early and we always got to pump the brakes a little bit. But with the Blues, they're the only team in the league as of this recording that's played one game. Everybody else has played more than a game. They won their first one against Columbus and they looked good, but I mean, it was Columbus. So let's take that with a grain of salt. But I mean, Nashville, they haven't won a game since the Global Series. They won the 2 versus the Sharks. I'm not reading too much into that. The Sharks are probably one of the bottom teams in the league.
Yeah.
But I definitely want to highlight Dallas in this division. And it's a team that I had in the dogfight for a wild card spot and, went back and forth on putting them in or out. As you said, Ottinger looks great to start. And oftentimes when a team gets a real hot start, if they can win 5-6 in a row, it can really set the precedent for a successful season. And also just you have points banked up that you can, lose a few games later. So it's interesting to see Dallas get off to this start, especially with Robertson, like the whole contract dispute. I thought that might, change things up in the dressing room. But they look really good. Colorado, I mean, I feel like you don't even have to spend much time with them because they're just always going to be good,
yeah, they're a lock.
Realistically, the thing to watch with them is the goaltending to see like who really emerges there. Right.
Well, the team we should talk about in a negative kind of light here is the Minnesota Wild. And I think you were maybe on this train a little bit, but I will say just to quickly finish off that Dallas Stars conversation is Mason Marchment. What a storyline.
Oh yeah.
What a crazy storyline. That guy, I think we could talk about it all we want, regarding the Leafs as well. And I know people want to say like, oh, it's so hard to tell coming out of, but talk about another Leafs trade that's just aging like expired, disgusting milk.
Hey man,
like,
you got to respect Malgin though, right?
Oh, man, what a disaster. But yeah, I mean, Marchment, what a storyline. Just another big piece for the Stars and making my take look bad. But yeah, man, Minnesota, I mean, my guy Fleury, I feel bad for that whole situation. Like the Wild, especially with the Parise Suter contracts there, just you want to be excited for like Boldy, Rossi, Addison, some of these younger guys coming in, but the Wild are looking rough.
And Rossi got scratched, did he not, the other night? I don't think he played.
The Wild are looking rough.
The Wild, I mean, they're 0-3 to start, and I mean, let me just quickly, I wanted to pull up their schedule and see who they got coming up, but like for them to start 0-3, it's not looking good. And I personally was always, pushing more against the Minnesota Wild. I didn't think they were a legit lock for the playoffs, which a lot of people had them as their third place team in that division. Let's see here. So Minnesota's got Vancouver, Boston, and Montreal coming up, and then Ottawa. So they got some games they can definitely take advantage of and win there. So out of those 4 games, I mean, Vancouver, Boston, Montreal, Ottawa, they got to win at least, 3 of those to set themselves back on track here.
You can't be going like 5-6 losses or 7 losses in your first 10 games. Like that would be horrendous for them. And there's a chance that happens. We'll see. But yeah, let's just rip through the Pacific really quickly too. Just and then we'll transition over to some maybe fantasy conversations and everything to start the season. But the Pacific, I think the Campbell conversation with the Oilers already concerned. The Canucks rough start, but man, the Calgary Flames. It's kind of the similar thing of like other teams we talked about being careful to hype them up and being careful on their conversation. And maybe the Flames were feeling that pressure, but they're performing to start the year.
Oh yeah. I mean, they beat Colorado on night 1, which I think was like a pretty good value grab there if you wanted to pick them. I think they might've been the favorite that night, but they had Colorado on a back-to-back. So they could have took advantage of that after Colorado's, banner night and all that. They win that one, and then they obviously have the emotional one versus Edmonton, which it's a shame
they
they're
send
only playing.
Campbell packing.
Yeah, they sent him packing quick, and part of that reason was because of Nazem the Dream. Yeah, our boy.
Kadri's looking really good, and someone actually said that in my chat the other night. It was like we talk about all these players that like age like milk. Kadri's aging like fine wine, man. That guy, it just like if he stays healthy, he keeps getting more mature and like. He's just understanding the game in a better way. Like, I just remember, like, the conversations. And the same thing was with Stamkos. Like, I think there's something to be said in, like, some of these immature players, like, when they start their career. Like, Stamkos was always criticized for being so immature, having so much skill, but just not having his overall game. Like, look at Stamkos on the ice right now. Like, he's still – I look at Stamkos being drafted a year before Tavares. And it's like Tavares is still good, but like watching Stamkos on the ice is like a different conversation. And that's like Kadri too. Like Kadri was in the same draft as Tavares. We have to have that conversation. And I mean, I think if someone 3-4 years ago said Tavares versus Kadri as like a real debate, I'd be like, you are freaking stupid. Like Tavares is like, but I don't even think that's like a dumb conversation anymore. Like Kadri's right there, like right there as like you could put him as a number one center right now, the way he's playing, and it's like, it's not even stupid. Like,
yeah.
When he's a second line center, he's the best second line center in the league, or at least top 3.
And even if his point totals are to fall off, right, John, like he just affects the game in so many other ways. Like Stamkos does too when he's out there. Like defensively, he's pretty responsible. And then physically, just the edge that he has to his game. Calgary looks really good to start, but I think we both had that one. So, and I think most people did. What do you think about Matty Beniers, my boy in Seattle?
Yeah, the Kraken are fun early on. I hope they treat the Shane Wright situation right, because I think either send him back to Kingston after. I think that's maybe what happens after the 9 games. We'll see what happens. But I do think they need to handle that situation with their depth. I mean, the fact that they have the kind of guys they have in the bottom 6, like a Tanev on the 4th line, so they have the depth. I think if goaltending can stick for them, I think the Kraken could be a team that stays in every game, similar to that Buffalo conversation. I think LA is a wild card team because like the goaltending is the other conversation. When you're involved in 7-6 games, like you need to look at like the defense and goaltending as a conversation. But the other 2 California teams, I'd say, are right off. Outside of that, Pacific Division, I think Vegas is the one where we might have been. I mean, you had them in a wild card. I think Logan Thompson's looked really good to start. So if he can ride out, I mean, that guy's an early Calder favorite for sure. So, but yeah, I think that overall Pacific Division, LA's for me the wild card. But I think Vancouver, I still have confidence will turn it around. But I think if we had betting odds right now, or based on what we've seen, I mean, unless you disagree, I feel like Vegas, Calgary, Edmonton are probably the top 3 teams in that division based on what we've seen at least.
Yeah, and Eichel's look good so far. I mean, as we transition to the fantasy talk, I'm trying to pick up Logan Thompson really bad and make a deal in my league for him, because I think Vegas is going to be good. I don't know about first in the division. I still think that belongs to the Flames, but yeah, Vegas looks good. I mean, better than I even thought they were going to be. So yeah, that's the Pacific. I mean, the only teams we haven't really touched on quickly, Anaheim and the Sharks. I know you said the other California teams in general are kind of irrelevant, and I think the Sharks are going to be, in that hunt for Bedard. With the Coyotes.
I want them to get him. Yeah, I think I'd prefer the Sharks over the Yotes.
That'd be awesome, man, for him to go to California. I think that'd be such a sick story. And the Ducks, I still think it's transition year for them, but McTavish has really shined in a few games. So keep an eye on that, because he looks dialed in, and he could be a rookie favorite as well, maybe behind Beniers.
Yeah, and I think that's more so why I'd be down for San Jose to get Bedard, because like LA's gotten a bunch of their draft picks recently, and Anaheim like getting those top picks and like a Zegras and McTavish and all those guys. So I think San Jose is due.
Yeah, man, it's almost like all the California teams, they were, top of the league for so long. They're all going to start building up around the same time. Maybe the Sharks will lag behind a little bit.
They'll be delayed, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, once the Kings are, return to one of the top teams, the Pacific, the Ducks and Sharks could be there in a few years as well, once they get their draft picks in order, especially if the Sharks are able to get.
And you know what? I get the Sharks are like, they have this whole mindset with the organization is like, they don't want to be bad because of ticket sales and their whole organization and how long they've been like competitive and in playoffs. It's like, they're just doing the team more harm. Like having these great players on the team. Like I can understand keeping like Couture and keeping Hurdle, because Couture is your captain, and like Hurdle's still young enough where it's like, if you try to rebuild over the next 3-4 years, like Hurdle will still be good. But outside of that, man, like I just don't see the logic in like paying a Timo Meier and keeping him long-term when there's so much value. And like the Erik Karlsson situation, I mean, you'd probably have to like give up more assets to have a team take the contract. So it's like, I don't know if that's worth it, but like some of these guys like Meier, LeBanc, like start freeing space up, make deals, let the younger guys play. Yeah, so we'll see what happens with San Jose, but I think if they got Bedard, obviously that'd be a huge transitional move for them. But yeah, so let's go over some fantasy pickups. So you just kind of alluded to trade for Logan Thompson. Is there any goalie that you see maybe that's even on waivers? Like I was even thinking like Buffalo, again, it's a risky conversation, but like if one of those guys like an Eric Comrie, I don't know, he was okay against Florida, but I wonder if like a Comrie or like the Flyers had a good start, like Hart, like maybe having one of those guys like a third or fourth goalie. I wonder if that's an interesting conversation.
Yeah, I mean, Carter Hart, as of right now I know you play mostly on Yahoo, John. I'm on ESPN, but Carter Hart right now on ESPN is ranked as the 4th best goalie in the NHL based on his numbers out of the gate here with the Flyers getting off to a hot start.
Obviously, yeah, that schedule coming up for the Flyers. I mean, against Tampa, it'll probably
it's gonna fade. It's gonna fade. But I think Carter Hart has value because he's gonna start 60 games for the Flyers. And if they can stay even a mediocre team, which might be a lot to ask as the season gets going, but if they can, Carter Hart could be a decent little pickup there on the waiver wire. As you told me earlier, before we jumped on, Matt Murray obviously getting hurt. He's somebody to always keep an eye on there because he's going to get starts. He's going to get reps and wins with the Leafs because they're good.
Yeah, when he comes back,
He comes back in a month or so. So that's one to keep an eye on and put in the back of your head for once he returns. Other goaltenders that I'm looking at, I mean, Varlamov's, he's a really good goalie. I just don't know how many starts he's going to get with the Islanders, with them handing the keys over to Sorokin full time. But he's one to keep an eye on in case Sorokin struggles a bit and they want to give a few additional starts to Varlamov. I feel like that could be one. But other than that, I think those are the ones that are really popping my eye on the waiver wire, as well as Craig Anderson or Eric Comrie. What about you? Anyone else?
Yeah, the only other maybe couple I would look at is, and Sutter just showed it against Edmonton, was like, don't be surprised if Vladar gets thrown in a bunch of games. Sutter maybe just has that preference of like doing a 1A, 1B situation. Obviously, Markstrom should be the guy, but Vladar might be put in some situations where on a night, if you need a goalie, look out for Vladar as the option. Obviously, with Edmonton, if Jack Campbell's a conversation, then Stuart Skinner could be another 1A, 1B situation. So a couple Canadian, Alberta teams there that you might want to look at the 1B goalie as an option in fantasy, especially if you're short on goalies, if you're only holding on to two. Outside of that, I think there's a few low-key guys that you could look at. I'm looking at the Carolina Hurricanes. Marty Necas could be in for a big breakout year. I actually just picked him up in one of my leagues. So look out for a Marty Necas, especially if he gets a lot of power play time. We'll see what happens out of that. Yeah, the only other one I was thinking, and you kind of alluded to it, is like Nashville. Some of those like secondary core guys like Anita Ryder or Tolvanen. Look up for those guys. If you have them, great. I think Niederreiter got drafted by a lot of people late, and he's had a good start to the year, especially in that global series. I think he had a couple points, few points. Yep. But so yeah, just some of those surrounding core guys. I know a lot. Luke Cunnin was another guy that was picked up pretty heavy because he got boosted at the top line on San Jose and then top power play unit. So that's like an early conversation for fantasy always, is like look for those guys that get that boost from like the bottom six into even like a second power play and maybe get some more points. Because another guy that we just talked off air is like, I made the drop because I thought he was hurt, but Jake DeBrusk gets boosted to the top line and he puts up some points Bergeron. If he stays in that position before Marchand comes back, DeBrusk is going to put up numbers.
What about some of these rookies that I feel like have faded maybe in fantasy value recently just because they're slow starts and it's going to take them some time to adjust to the league? Like a Shane Wright, who, like we said earlier, might get sent down. Like a Slafkovsky, like a Sanderson in Ottawa, we were talking about before a few episodes ago. He's behind with Alberga. He's behind, I think, Brandstrom and Shabbat. So he's not going to get the ice time, but like, could we see him maybe get power play too, right? And flourish there? Or even a Cole Perfetti in Winnipeg. How are you feeling about some of those rookies? And Kent Johnson as well in Columbus.
Yeah, it goes back and forth. I guess it just depends on the situation. Like the Perfetti one is interesting for me in Winnipeg because there's obviously a clear path for him to get like crazy time and like power play time. I know you were kind of alluding to forwards there, but even like a younger player like a Kalen Addison in Minnesota, if he gets like power play time, I think he got like 2 or 3 assists the other night. Like that could be a guy to look out for. So some of these younger defensemen, I think it varies on the conversation. Yeah, Sanderson maybe in a tougher situation. But even like, I know it's easy to go back to the Leafs conversation, but with Muzzin going down, I mean, if it happens to be a situation where Sandin gets a boost in ice time, maybe gets back on that second power play unit, maybe he's a sneaky guy to look at. But I would even go as far as to say like, there's a couple defensemen too that like, again, maybe they're not in the power play, but getting more ice time. I mean, we've talked about Noah Dobson, like with the Islanders, but even like a Keandre Miller with the Rangers, like who knows if he gets a lot of time in the top 4, gets decent second power play time. We'll see what happens out of that. But I would say, yeah, there's a lot of younger defensemen that are easier to pick out. The younger forwards, it's just opportunity and ice time. Like we could see, I mean, as we're recording this, we could see a Shane Wright and Slafkovsky both sent down to different directions. Like Slafkovsky, likely the AHL. Shane Wright, I would say, send him back to Kingston, let him put up 100-something point year. So yeah, I think there's probably guys that you should wait on. I think there's quite a few people that still have Slafkovsky just sitting on their bench, hoping he goes off. I wouldn't hold your breath on that personally, but again, we've been proven wrong clearly quite a few times on this podcast so far. So we should definitely wait and see.
Yeah, I'm keeping my eye on. I mean, it was the Montreal Leafs game, the opening night game. A guy like David Savard too. For in terms of shot blocker, this guy I think had 10 shot blocks that night. I mean, a guy like that, I always am looking in the waiver wires, like looking for those guys who just block a crap ton of shots. So he's one of those guys. Just closing out the fantasy conversation too. I know Jake Neighbors scored on opening night for the Blues. Keep an eye on him. He's not on the power play yet for St. Louis, but if he gets a look, watch out there. And then Alexander Holtz. I know he's playing with Nico Hischier on the top line.
Yeah.
So I'm always watching him to see if he would be a value add.
You know, it's a crazy one that I was looking at, and he had a couple points the other night, was with no McAvoy and Grzelcyk, freaking Connor Clifton is getting decent power play time. I'm pretty sure as a defenseman right now, like he's up there. I think in overall Yahoo rankings right now, he's like top like 80 right now.
Wow.
And like Connor Clifton, I feel like I was laughing at that guy last year. So I'd have to look at it right now. But I think with McAvoy, and I know that Mike Riley was getting, I think, some power play time. But Clifton's an interesting one because, yeah, McAvoy's out till Thanksgiving. I think Grzelcyk's out for a bit. As we look at it right now, Hampus Lindholm, I think, is on the top power play. And I think they were cycling Clifton and Mike Riley on the second unit, maybe, I think. But Clifton had some points. He's on the second unit. So look out for Clifton and Mike Riley because, like, God forbid for the Bruins, if Hampus Lindholm went down, your next two guys in terms of production in any sense is Mike Riley and Connor Clifton.
Wow. It's like, I didn't even know they were playing Anton Strawman. Like,
yeah,
their blue line is like, I feel like it's barely holding together, yet they've got off to such a great start. So that's definitely a story to watch there with those guys.
If you had Hampus Lindholm, great. If you have desperation for a defenseman, look out for, as I said, I should have said Mike Riley because Riley, I think, is the guy listed right now on the second power play unit. But between Mike Riley and Connor Clifton, if they get power play time and in the top four, especially Mike Riley, he got put on waivers and he's on the top. He's on the top pair right now with Hampus Lindholm. Like, that's crazy. Yeah. And apparently there was a heavy rumor, Lucas, and I think this is legit because it came from two reporters talking about it, that the Habs were heavily debating picking up Mike Riley on waivers and just didn't because they didn't want to do the Bruins a favor with the cap.
The cap hit. It's just the cap hit. Like, he's a good player. He's a good player. It's just a matter of that cap hit. Because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, John, it's like around 3. Yeah.
Which is not even that bad. But again, it's like in the flat cap right now, you're not really trying to just straight out help anyone.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, maybe I'm wrong for saying this. But I don't even know, like, the way he's been playing. I feel like teams are always looking for right shot defensemen. But do you think a team would actually, you know what? They probably would. Do you think a team would claim Justin Hall?
I think absolutely. I actually fully believe because at the end of the day, Justin Hall, like, as much as we dog on him, he's serviceable. You know what I mean? Like, I know he's not great, but he's serviceable.
No, yeah, you're right. Honestly, I'm thinking about it. He's a right shot defenseman.
Yeah, it's only $2 million, and he's a righty. I mean, if he was a lefty, we're having a different conversation. But because he's a righty, teams look at it and they go, "Holy, here's a righty!" Right? Just like the Leafs are doing it.
Yeah. Well, man, I was even surprised that freaking the Sonny Milano situation. Like, what a disaster. Doesn't get signed until now, $750K on a 1-year deal, and doesn't even get picked up on waivers. Like, that's crazy how much for a guy that had like half a point per game last year. Just
like, what happened there? There's got to be a story there as to why like teams aren't valuing him
around. I just don't get it. But yeah, there's certain scenarios on waivers, like even a Heppo Niemi with Florida, like he doesn't get picked up, and then like randoms are getting picked up. And I mean, the one storyline that was crazy from right at the start of the year was Connor Ingram for the Preds. Like they signed Kevin Lankinen, and Connor Ingram, like that save, what was it, like a 50 save performance against Colorado?
Yep.
And or something like that. And then
almost got to win. Almost got to win in that series.
Yeah. You know what? I think there's a lot of conversations with waivers. Like it's interesting because even I feel like a couple of years ago I would have laughed if someone told me like even a Wayne Simmons. Like I feel like there's so much value in having a guy like that, especially on what 800 or 900K or 850K, whatever he's on. It's like no one picked him up.
I know. And the Flyers were heavily rumored on that. And I think that honestly for the Flyers, I'm shocked they didn't do it because this season is what it is, and you're probably not going to be in the mix. So like, why not just add him, give the fans a nice story, give the boost to the community.
Yeah.
Simmons would have loved to go back there. I mean, it would have just been a great fit. I feel like even him, he would have made the lineup, obviously. And it's one that I don't understand, but
the waiver one's always a conversation. I think it also just like the GMs have this thing in their head that they don't want to get on other GMs' bad side, right?
Yeah.
It's like future trade conversations and different like contract negotiations and all these things. So it's like,
unless it's the Leafs, they always seem to get guys claimed off waivers.
Yeah,
100%. Everybody just wants to dig.
That's why it was a little surprising that those guys went through. Yeah, so let's just go into the conversation too of early on, based on we talked about overreactions, but which teams we think will easily turn it around.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you want to go first, or I have one easy candidate here
to turn it around.
To turn it around, and that's the Vancouver Canucks. I think it's easy to panic mode right now. I think the immaturity for some players is showing, but I mean, in all three of those games where they choked to start the year, like they choked. They were in the lead. They had a lead. They were playing like well, and I was shocked that Philly result. Like you're up 2-0 on the first few shots on Carter Hart. And then, it looked like Philly just controlled that game at home. But I mean, the Vancouver Canucks, I think just in terms of the skill, the defense is a conversation, but they had a couple injuries there, even McKayev. Like, I think once they have a healthy roster, I think if Demko's Demko, they're going to be in every game. And I think some of those chokes will just reverse and they're going to get wins. So I think Vancouver is the one team I'm most confident they'll be fine, I think.
Yeah, I'm going to go a little bit more bold. I think the Canucks, I think they're going to be fine. I think a little bit more bold, though, and it might just be me sticking to my guns. I think the Devils will turn it around.
Wow.
I don't have them as a team that's going to be making playoffs, but I think they're going to push and they're going to figure this out. And a lot of it, I think, John, is going to be a coaching change. I think after you see the fans, cheering for a guy to get fired, as Brian Burke once said, it would be cruel and unusual to bring that coach back. And so they got to make that move. I mean, I don't know if that's going to happen.
How many games of fire Lindy Ruff? I mean, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised as we're recording this video if it's released
and he's fired.
Lindy Ruff's been fired.
Yeah. And I think it's just got to happen. Like when the whole fan base turns on it, like, and they're done there in New Jersey. They've had a team that has been so good for so many years prior to this new era, once Brodeur left, and they're sick of this mediocrity of this team.
You know what? I think they're also sick. I don't mean to interrupt, but I was just going to also add, I think what they're also sick of, and it's easy to just rag on the coach, but when you go from a franchise goalie like Martin Brodeur, and just now for the longest time, it's like your goalies are now Vanacek and Blackwood, and both have been so stinky.
Mm-hmm.
So stinky.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that's also the conversation too. Like the forward group is so deep, and I think they have one of the more underrated defense cores. If goaltending's stinky, like we've watched too many Leaf teams with bad goaltending just get like it's a thing, man. Like goaltending is it is life and death in hockey, man. If you have bad goaltending, nothing.
You can't go anywhere. You can't go anywhere. And we even talked about it. I remember we talked about it on a previous episode that the Devils had such bad goaltending last year that even if they got like 900 goaltending, 905 goaltending, which is still below league average, if they got that, they would see such an improvement. And to start the year in the first couple games here, how bad it's been, it just can't be like this for much longer. I forbid to believe it. So I think the Devils will figure out a way to turn it around and make themselves somewhat competitive here. So that's mine that I'll go with. Let's do one.
You know what's crazy? I was just going to say quickly, weren't we a year or two ago talking about Blackwood potentially being like the future Team Canada starter? Like that is wild to me. Like how it since all we're not going to bring up like too much pandemic stuff, but like I think that's when Blackwood's stock also just went down. And it's like, buddy, his play is just it's been atrocious too. Like it's just been a disaster in New Jersey, man.
That's another like Canadian goalie. I remember when we were picking like the Olympic team, if Canada was going to go to the Olympics, the NHL were going to go. And it was like, who are the three goalies going to be? And Blackwood was like the third goaltender on a lot of depth charts. And it's just, that is nowhere near where we're at now. So crazy to see. How about let's give one more each of a bounce back team.
Minnesota for me. Minnesota. Yeah. I can't, maybe they are going to be bad, but I just think they have too much skill in the forward group, and their defense is like, their defense needs to be way better than it is. I can't accept this slander from Fleury, man. He's just too nice. Like the fact that people are booing him, there's so many more problems there. And I just think that Minnesota, the way they're playing, I think regardless of how naive you want to be, if you're watching this and you're a Wild fan or whoever you are, like they are playing like literally a bottom feeder right now. Like a complete bottom feeder. They exchanged goals against LA, but outside of that, they've looked like an absolute wild card. And I think Kaprizov, Zuccarello, like those two guys will still be buzzing all year.
They've given up 20 goals in their first three games.
3 games, yeah.
That is nuts.
That's nuts. So I think the Wild will turn it around in some sense. I don't know based on how they're playing if they're going to make the playoffs, but I think they'll turn it around where they're like, they still finish top 4, top 5 in the division. But based on how they're playing right now, atrocious. Absolutely atrocious. And I mean, Chicago and Arizona, as we record this right now, both have a win and Minnesota doesn't.
And Minnesota, this is also so fascinating. All 3 of those losses were on home ice, which like usually when you go into Minnesota, it's a rock and barn and it's hard to win in there. They've lost all 3 of those games on home ice. That's crazy.
Yeah.
My second team to close this segment out. Listen, they're 2-2. It's not the end of the world. And I don't want to just keep jumping back to them, but it is the Leafs. Listen, I think we need to highlight them as a bounce back team because Austin Matthews has pretty much had his worst start of his career, I think.
Yeah.
At least like
he always scores in the season opener.
Always. And it's not even just that, man. It's like when I'm watching the games, like he's not the guy I know that dominates games. Like there's so many portions of the game he's gone ghost mode, and that's not him. Like it's just not. And so he will bounce back. And the Leafs, as a result, they get some Austin Matthews goals. They're going to win a lot more games than, 2 out of 4. So I see them, bouncing back quickly here.
Yeah, I think I don't know if I can go another year, man, with like just ending at game 7. I can't. Man, it's one of those things like the saying of like you continuously do something over and over again. Like it's psychotic. It's crazy. If they do it again this year, I don't know. I think I'm going to go on some hiatus or something. I don't know, man.
We got to go on some camping trip together and just get away.
And what's so funny to me too is like, I know it's easy to just be stuck in Leaf land and like, but I feel like they always go through these disgusting, just embarrassing losses in October and November. And it just puts such a bad taste in the mouth of like, and a mind of like realizing literally a few months ago, we were just so down bad and so upset. And it's like, now we're just soaking embarrassing losses again. Like, what is this? So I don't know. I think at the end of the day, what a disaster. I think they're easily like a playoff team. And if they somehow didn't make the playoffs, like, I know that's it should be a silly conversation, but if there's any scenario where a team like the Leafs or a team like the Oilers don't make the playoffs, like with players like that, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if a team like that ever missed the playoffs, you should absolutely, no doubt, blow it up. I don't care if it's irrational. I don't care if it's like not the way to go, but like if any scenario like that, even there's been a couple times where teams have missed the playoffs and they haven't really, like the Islanders last year, I think Trotz soaked that, but there should have been a lot more that fell.
Oh yeah. Like way more accountability.
Yeah. I understand that there was like the bad start with their home ice situation, but there's some teams that, man, like they'll have that happen. And it's just like, oh, whatever. Like we'll fire a coach and just move on. Like I feel that with the Leafs. I feel they've had so many first round exits, and I feel like there's been no accountability to the extent past like just the media harassment, essentially. Like the media obviously has given the Leafs so much shit, and the fans have given the Leafs so much shit, but like in terms of internal, I'm sure it's been hectic, but like the only person that's fallen is Babcock, like, and Kadri. But that was the suspensions.
Yeah, and
that's it. Babcock and Kadri, that's it.
Yeah, and then it's like, who's gonna fall on the sword next? Like everybody points the blame at like Kyle Dubas and Sheldon Keefe,
yeah.
And oftentimes, man, like you have one coach to burn through with a core. You don't have a second one. When the second one comes around, there's deeper problems that need to be addressed. So I totally agree with you. And like Edmonton, as far as Edmonton goes, I think they're going to be fine. But yeah, they have to be competitive this year. So many people are saying they're the best team in Canada. They got to put up or shut up and really show it again, and make second round, third round Stanley Cup finals this year, right?
All the criticism, if it comes down to it, where any one of Calgary, Winnipeg, or Ottawa have a more successful team this season, and maybe even a playoff than Edmonton, Toronto, we've got to start having some like really like more so serious conversations, because like it is so far gone that 2 of the best players in the world are on these two major Canadian markets. And if one of those guys don't win a cup soon, like I'm saying like 3 guys, Draisaitl in there too, but I'm saying like more so Matthews, obviously being like, I'd say the best American player in the league right now, and Connor McDavid being the best Canadian player in the league right now, on to the biggest Canadian markets, like you've got to freaking get it done. If like those two are the biggest candidates to win a cup for the first time for a Canadian team, it's gotta freaking happen, man. It's been, are we at 30? We're about to be at 30 years.
We're at 30 years in 2023. Yeah, 30 years.
It's gonna be 30 years since the Canadian team. What a joke.
Yeah,
what a freaking joke.
You know how I knew that too. I know we know it's 93, but I saw a video making its rounds on Twitter yesterday of a Habs fan leaving Detroit, and I guess the Red Wings had beat them, and yeah, they had beat them that night, and the Habs fan was leaving and just rubbing it in, flipping the birds off and everything. And the Red Wings fan said, "Get out of here." And he goes, "You guys haven't won the cup in how many years? 30 years. You haven't won the cup." He was just rubbing it in. But yeah, 30 years for this country, man.
I mean, I know we want to laugh at the Leafs, and obviously it's easy. Like, it's so embarrassing, the cup drought. But at the end of the day, you can fade all the way to the Leafs cup drought as your exit. But all Canadian teams should be embarrassed. All of them. It's like maybe Montreal a little less, but still, we're talking about 1993.
Hey, let's give Vancouver some props. Give Vancouver some props, man. They got to the final. in 11.
Oh, how do the fans react after that?
Anyways,
embarrassing all across the board. So you have 2 of the best players, 3 of the best players. I keep saying 2, 3 of the best players on these 2 major Canadian markets. Throw Mitch Marner in there. Throw Mitch Marner in there.
Yeah.
4. And like, it's gotta be. Edmonton did something last year and lost to the cup team. And I mean, it's kind of funny because the Leafs have been losing to cup finalists and cup champs like every year, it seems like. Boston made it to the final, and like, let's go. Yeah. Like, they lose to Washington in the first round. Following year, Washington wins the cup. They lost to Boston. They went to the cup final in 2019. Lost to Montreal. Montreal went to the cup final. Lost to Tampa. Went to the cup final.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's definitely a storyline, but there's no more excuses. I'm sorry.
No, it's not an excuse. But pivoting quickly to some breaking news we had today that helps these 2 teams, particularly Toronto and Edmonton. The salary cap is looking like next year we could see a $4 million bump based on if the players pay the escrow back, which it's looking like it's trending that way, according to Gary Bettman. $4 million bump, Johnny. That is a second liner right there. That's like a second, third line player, really good player adding to your team. That's a Cali Yarncroc.
Yeah, that's crazy. I know I saw the rumors early on, and overall was like they could see at least a $1 million bump, and I think that's if it's not paid in full, right?
Yes, yeah. So we're gonna see $1 million bump. It almost sounds like that's a for sure at this point.
That's a for sure. So the fact that like the conversation is maybe even 4 for next year is wild to me. I also think it sucks because then it's like, as Leaf fans or like as Oilers fans or whatever, it's like then you're making the excuse of like, oh, next year this is a big opening. Kerfoot's contract off. Look at all the opening the cap and an initial $4 million. Like, next year's the year. Yeah, 2024 big run. So I hate that. I absolutely hate that, because then you're going to the stress of like, not only is it Dubas's last year this year on the contract, it's Mr. number 34 and 88 next year.
Yeah,
and that is going to be stressful. As a big time Morgan Rielly fan, I was so stressed going into the year when it's his final year on this contract. I honestly think the stress levels overall are going to be stupid high if they go into the season with one of those guys not extended.
Yeah, I'm getting anxiety thinking about it, to be honest with you. I am like hyperventilating even thinking about it, because you're talking about the best goal scorer in the world potentially walking away. And I think a lot of it is he loves it here, just based off of, media members speaking to him and everything. I think he loves it here. I think he loves the city. But at the end of the day, if they don't win, he's going to evaluate his options. And so if they once again go out in the first round again this year, and God forbid they do it again next year or don't make playoffs, there's a likelihood he could leave. And the same goes for Willie Nylander if he doesn't feel like he gets the respect he deserves and the money he really deserves, because he's underpaid right now. Quite frankly.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. And especially with like the conversations, like if Dubas gets the boot and the Leafs go out in the first round, like I think it's very likely he goes into the season without an extension.
Yeah, because a lot of, they have some linkage there with Matthews and Dubas, a lot of history, and Matthews really values Kyle Dubas as a GM and as a boss. You could really look at it that way. So I think, Dubas's future really affects what happens here. It really is all about the success of the team right now. What happens with the success of the team will determine a lot of what happens with these contracts and the future of keeping a Kyle Dubas.
Yeah, for sure.
But overall, I mean, the salary cap bump, it's going to help. It helps those teams. It helps all teams, except the ones that don't spend. Like looking at you, Arizona. But at the end of the day, as we were talking about with Matthews and Nylander coming off their current contracts and other big players whose contracts will expire, realistically, that $4 million is just going to go into those players. Even though you could think of it as a positive, it's not really like you can add because it's just going to,
I mean, directly, the rumor amount for Matthews right now is like 15, 16 mil per year.
Exactly.
That's the $4 million bump right there.
And I'd pay it, Johnny. I'd give it to him.
100%. Yeah. Any other hot takes to close out the pod? Anything else that will shake the world?
I'm trying to think what else. Oh, you know what? I wanted to quickly touch on just some quick hits on coaches and just like.
Oh yeah, okay. Let's do that quickly to wrap it up.
Rapid fire.
Coaches that are on the hottest seats ever, and I'm opening it up. Lindy, you're off.
Yeah.
Pack your bags. Get out of here.
You're gone. You're gone, son. If you make it by the time this podcast releases, I'll already be surprised.
Miracle.
But if you make it by Christmas time, God, that's your Christmas present, man, because there's no chance.
All right. I got a flaming one here for you. This is a comparison. This is who has like more of a chance to stay with their team. Bruce Boudreau, Sheldon Keefe.
The status of the Leafs right now, like, man, I was about to just slam down and say Bruce Boudreau. That's how confident I am with like Bruce Boudreau in the locker room there. But if they keep losing, you never know. I mean, I'm gonna go Bruce Boudreau because
to stay or to go
to stay. Okay. I think Sheldon Keefe's the one that gets the axe before Bruce Boudreau personally, because what I think is going to happen here is I don't see either of them.
Well, like Keefe's been there much longer at this point.
Yeah, and so you got to live with that room that Bruce just kind of got there, and I see both of them, if everything goes according to plan, how we predict it, to last this season. But at the end of the day, the results, if Bruce Boudreau makes the playoffs and loses in the first round, or if Sheldon Keefe makes the playoffs and loses in the first round, who's out? It's Sheldon Keefe. So I'm going to say Bruce Boudreau is more confident. I'm more confident in saying he will stay and Sheldon will go. What about you?
Yeah, I think I'm probably saying Keefe because I'm just thinking like to get the boot. I'm just saying if the Leafs were in a situation where they were at any point in the year out of a playoff spot, that's like there's no point this team outside of maybe the first few games should ever be out of a playoff spot. Like there should be a comfort level where it's like maybe you're in a wild card spot. It's like you're pushing to get back into a division spot and you feel that stress, but there should never be a point where like this team is points out and there's worry that they're going to miss.
Yeah.
The one guy I did want to throw into this conversation here just quickly as we're wrapping it up is Brad Larson for Columbus. If after the Johnny Gaudreau signing and all the hype, if the Jackets are sitting at the bottom, like at the actual bottom of the Metro, see ya, Brad. Peace.
Bye, Brad. Peace. You know who else
Subscribe, like, comment.
Yeah, you know who else is getting the peace? It's DJ Smith. I mean, he's gonna get the piece.
What?
If Ottawa,
really?
Well, I mean,
if missed the playoffs,
no,
or
not
just
even,
bad?
not even. If we hit Christmas time and they're second last or last in this division, I think Ottawa's gonna hit the panic button.
I don't see that happening though. I think
they just went out and added all these guys, and they're gonna be worse than last year. It's unacceptable.
No, I know, but I just don't see them that bad. Like I think by Christmas, I mean, yeah, I guess there is a possibility of that because Detroit's looking decent. Buffalo's in every game. Montreal's getting a couple wins. Like there is a chance. I mean, and I know Sens fans, they've been really pissed that DJ Smith, how he's handled certain lineup decisions, and that even Zaitsev, like the fact that this is like, it's such a petty debate, but like the fact that Zaitsev's in the lineup over like a Holden in Sens fans' eyes are just like, they're going crazy over it.
You know who else is getting the piece? Another piece for you? Dean Evison, aka Creed from The Office. He's getting the piece.
Yeah,
I'm telling
honestly,
you.
if the Wild are still like cheese by like November,
He might be first.
Yeah, he might be first. I think at the end of the day, Lindy Ruff is still holds the cake, but Dean is definitely up there. I'd say Brad is up there. So Columbus, Minnesota, and New Jersey. Get yourselves a new coach potentially. We'll see. Anyone else? I don't know if there's anyone else in that conversation. Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe like this is a stretch. But I think like maybe if Nashville, like, because I think even watching their documentary, like John Hines was like, oh, another full season, like the confidence in the room. If Nashville was like ever to find themselves in the 5 or 6 spot in that Central Division, especially like after making the playoffs, we'll see. But I think that's maybe a stretch, maybe a little piece there.
Maybe a little piece.
Outside of that, I think it's easy to talk about the Canadian teams, but obviously I think it's kind of funny to say this, but I actually think out of all the Canadian teams, I think Sutter his job is safe, but I think Marty St. Louis' job is probably like the safest out of the East Canadian teams by far. Like by far.
Yeah.
Like I think we look at DJ Smith and Keefe, like I think there's question marks there, and I think Marty St. Louis is by far the safest out of the East Canadian teams. So there you go. And the Habs might be below all or below those two. So
yeah, the Habs might come way below them and he's still safe. And the other two might get the axe.
Yeah.
You never know.
Which is ironic.
Yeah.
Anything else? I think we've had some good conversations on this pod. A little just freestyle in episode 10. Get the ideas flowing. And as I said, guys, ask some questions, recommend some potential guests. We got some cool guests coming up and some cool pod episodes coming up. But Lucas, anything else to finish it off?
Nah, just hit a subscribe on Spotify or Apple and make sure you support the show. It'd be great for us. Yeah. Keeps the content rolling.
Hit
those 5 stars. Hit the 5 stars like Johnny's saying there. And yeah, maybe next week before we record, we'll maybe throw out a tweet and just get some questions, see what kind of engagement we get from you guys. And
get a little mailbag going.
Get a little mailbag, run through some questions from you guys, shout you guys out for supporting the show. But yeah, episode 10, John, on the road to 100 and much more.
Let's go. All right. From Lucas and myself, John, Hot Take Hockey, episode 10 on the pod, guys. Appreciate you guys watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify, Apple, wherever you're tracking the pod. We do really appreciate it. And we'll see you on the next one. So subscribe, like, comment. Have a good one. Hope you enjoyed the chats. Peace.